Something I want to get off my chest right away is that Two-Face is my favourite Batman villain, thanks to Batman the Animated Series. I can vividly remember watching Two-Face Part 1 on a family holiday to Llandudno in Wales, sat on the floor with my neck arched up to look at the TV that was mounted high on the wall. By the time the episode was finished, my mouth was wide open, slack-jawed in shock at what I'd just seen, and I had a really sore neck. And I could not wait for part 2. There was something about Harvey Dent's struggle with his anger that spoke to me, and from that point on I kept an eye out for Two-Face in any Batman comics that happened to make their way into my hands. Although I soon discovered that the Two-Face in the comic books bore very little resemblance to the one I had seen on screen. And how did he differ? Well, let's go back to the very first appearance of Two-Face. Debuting in Detective Comics number 66 in 1942, we are introduced to dashing District Attorney Harvey Kent. Yes, you heard me correctly, I didn't misspeak. His name was originally Harvey Kent, and he wasn't renamed Harvey Dent until Batman number 50 in 1948. Now, Kent was prosecuting a high-profile mob case when one day in court, the defendant threw a bottle of acid into the dashing DA's face, leaving him with a terrible disfigurement that conventional medicine couldn't repair. Driven mad at the thought of being hideous and no longer receiving the affections of his fiancée, Kent decided to bet the course of his life on the toss of a double-headed coin that he had scarred on one side. If good side came up, he'd continue to devote himself to good, but if the scarred side came up, he would renounce heroism and devote himself to crime. It was a simpler time, but even by those standards, the characterization was a bit two-dimensional. Excuse the pun. Like many characters over Batman's then 50 years of publication, Two-Face's history in the comic books was pretty convoluted. Dent, or Kent, I've honestly lost track, was eventually cured with plastic surgery. However, there were 3 imposter Two-Faces: Dent's butler, Wilkins, George Blake, and the actor Paul Sloan, who was disfigured in a similar incident and decided to become the new Two-Face. Unfortunately, Dent would eventually become Two-Face again after attempting to foil a robbery and getting caught in an explosion, undoing the work of his surgeons and rendering him permanently disfigured with no possibility of a cure. Once again, the loss of his good looks drove him to insanity, which is pretty vain if you think about it. It's important to remember that prior to BTAS, Two-Face had never appeared outside of the comics, and that for a period of time he wasn't even allowed to be in the comics, because he was considered too gruesome. You have to understand that, at the time, comic books faced a lot of scrutiny and were frequently cited as the cause of juvenile delinquency. So, for several decades, mainstream comic books focused on goofy sci-fi adventures rather than gritty crime stories. By the late 1980s and early 90s, the scaremongering around comic books had died down, and the success of more mature comics like Watchmen and The Dark Knight, as well as the runaway success of Tim Burton's Batman film, indicated that audiences were prepared for more mature interpretations of their beloved comic book characters. Enter Batman the Animated Series. Now, there are 2 ways in which Batman the Animated Series redefined Two-Face, and let's start with the most obvious one: the way he looks. Two-Face has traditionally been drawn wearing an orange suit on his good side and a purple plaid suit on his bad side, and of course there had been attempts to modernise his look over the years. Why, in the 1980s he even wore a turtleneck. Ugh. When it came time to introduce Two-Face in BTAS, the character designers had a challenge ahead of them. Early sketches showed Two-Face with more of a comic-accurate look, but imagine trying to animate the cross-hatching on the purple side of the costume. In a move that, upon reflection, seemed obvious, they opted for a more streamlined black and white suit. It was certainly less of an eyesore than the orange and purple, let me tell you. It's such a simple and elegant design, and it really gets the point across that this is a man divided between good and bad. This look gradually worked its way into the comics over time, potentially as more people that grew up watching the show found their way into the comics industry. The second way they redefined Two-Face is in his backstory. I've discussed previously how the show's writers took all the best things from the comics and discarded everything that didn't work. I'm going to hand over to Batman the Animated Series story editor Marty Pascoe to hear more about his creative philosophy in an interview from Batman the Animated podcast.
In our approach to the show, what we did is say, we are not going to be bound by any comics fans' idea of canon. We have a rich mythology here that goes back, at that point it was 60 years. And we said, why not just cherry pick from the best of it? And if some of the stuff is best in terms of conception, but might be played a little bit hokey because the comics are old, we don't need to be bound by that. So what we decided was we'll take elements of the villains from the comics, but if they needed to have a new backstory, if we needed to flesh out something that was only hinted at in the comics, we weren't bound by the comics.
And drop all the things that didn't work, they did. Gone were the imposter Two-Faces, gone were the dual accidents, and a new backstory was concocted. One that took elements from the comics but added a new, more psychologically sound reasoning for his mental breakdown. Alan Burnett, producer on Batman the Animated Series and writer of the story of Two-Face Part 1, devised a new origin for Two-Face, rooting his mental breakdown not in vanity, but in long-standing guilt and repressed anger. You see, Harvey Dent, Gotham City's popular district attorney, had a dark secret. After years of suppressing his feelings of guilt and anger over a childhood fight, these negative feelings formed into an alternate personality, Big Bad Harv. Big Bad Harv is the personification of Dent's rage and is not afraid of using violence to achieve his goals. Yes, it is a bit of a simplification of dissociative identity disorder, but this origin is infinitely superior to the original "oh no, I'm ugly now, so I'm gonna go commit crimes, hee hee hee" from the comics. After confronting mob boss Rupert Thorne, who was attempting to blackmail him about his condition, Dent was caught in an explosion, which resulted in half of his body being disfigured. This traumatic event led to a further psychological break, as both Harvey Dent and Big Bad Harv are replaced by Two-Face, a man obsessed with chance and duality. As Alan Burnett recounted in Back Issue Magazine 99's Batman the Animated Series 25th Anniversary Oral History, "I always thought that Harvey should have already been a split personality before the accident, and whatever control he has over the psychosis ended when his face became disfigured. I also went to a child psychiatrist to ask about how multiple personalities were created. I thought there was some kind of sexual abusive element, which I wanted to avoid, and learned that there's a variety of non-sexual reasons people develop these personalities. I always thought of Harvey as a rich goody-good kid who felt guilty about a minor offence, and the guilt kept building within him like water from a dripping faucet. Out of this, a coarse, angry side of him emerged, which became the monster. The monster would castigate the good side." A really interesting fact, however, is that about 6 months before Alan Burnett joined the team on BTAS, DC Comics published Batman Annual 14, which also looked to provide a more psychologically grounded origin for Two-Face. The story is called Eye of the Beholder, written by Andrew Helfer, with art by Chris Sprouse. This new comic book origin had Harvey Dent as the victim of childhood abuse at the hands of his cruel father. His father would play a game with him. He'd flip a coin, and if it came up heads, little Harvey would get a beating. If it was tails, he'd be left alone. Of course, his father was using a trick double-headed coin, so Harvey suffered greatly at his hands. Now, there's no way that anything like this would have gotten past the TV censors. For a start, they forbade references to child endangerment, along with many other things as illustrated by this image. But it's interesting to see two separate writers working independently of each other, settling on childhood trauma as the root for Harvey Dent's issues. Sadly, Eye of the Beholder has mostly been forgotten about, thanks in part to DC's frequent rebooting of their universe. This has the unfortunate side effect of invalidating stories as no longer being canon, or being canon to an alternate universe outside of the mainstream comics. Two-Face's origin has changed several times in recent decades, but none have come close to the dizzying heights of Batman the Animated Series, and, let's be frank, they probably never will.